Hey everybody, Kevin Elliott here with Home Dabbler. Nothing finishes off a paint job or a piece of finished carpentry like a nice, clean, straight bead of caulk. And nothing can protect your home better from air leaks and also water leaks like a nice bead of caulk around windows and doors and that sort of thing. The only problem for average homeowners is that it seems like everything comes in a caulking tube now. And you can get confused over what kind of caulk should I use. Is this an adhesive, or is this a silicone, or is this a latex? And so I'd like to do a little video to give you the basics of what caulk is, the different kinds of caulk, and then also some techniques, because if you've ever tried this, like say you tried to caulk around your bathtub or something, and you ended up trying to smooth that stuff out and it gets piled up on your finger and it makes a big, goopy, ugly mess. So I want to give you some pro tips on not only how to buy the right caulk, but how to install it, okay? So the first thing is the different kinds of caulk, and I have a few right here that I just pulled out of my shed. And you'll see there are lots of different kinds. The two main kinds that you need to know as far as a homeowner caulking job, there really only are two. And it is latex and silicone, okay? Latex and silicone. Now, after that, if you go into the big box store and look on the shelf, you start getting into the adhesives like this here. This is a heavy-duty construction adhesive. This is glue. This is not caulking, okay? And then you go to the really extreme where you have roofing cement. You can actually go up there and put roofing tar, do roofing repairs, and I love this stuff. It's amazing, but it's not caulk, okay? It's a totally different thing. It just comes in a caulking tube. So don't be confused when you see dozens of different caulking tubes. There really only are two kinds you need to worry about. Now, how do you know which one is which? All right, so there are a couple of telltale signs when you read these labels. The first one is anything that says acrylic or latex, okay? That is the most common caulk around your home, acrylic, latex. When you hear latex, you think water-based. You think clean up with water. Okay, and it'll say on the back of it, it'll say that this is a clean up with water. The reason that's super important, other than it's easier to clean up, is that latex caulks are paintable with average homeowner paint. So that's why you use latex around interior trim and places where you're going to paint. So if you really want to paint over this, make sure that your caulk says latex, okay? So that's the strength of this. It's also water cleanup, so it's really easy to wipe off of things. The downside to latex caulk, the weakness of latex caulk, is that it is not 100% waterproof. It's water resistant. So you can use it outside, but you really can't use it in areas where it's going to have consistent water. So for instance, if you have a windowsill, an outside windowsill that gets a lot of rain, you need to be careful and make sure that you probably don't want to use a latex caulk, because eventually it's going to fail. It'll shrink up and the water will leak in. Okay? So latex caulk is wonderful for areas that are going to be painted and that stay relatively dry. So anything inside basically, except for your bathrooms and your kitchen. And then outside, you can do trim around your windows, around your doors, around all of your trim work that you're going to paint. Latex caulk is the stuff. Now, move up a step to silicone caulk. And it says right there on the front, you can see when you read the label, waterproof silicone. And it'll say all over the place, 100% waterproof. Okay, that's the main strength of silicone caulk, is that it is 100% waterproof. It's also much more weather resistant. So if this is mostly used for kitchens and baths and outside applications that are going to be wet. So under your say door thresholds around your exterior doors, places like that. So silicone is amazing. It's also very, very flexible, so it can take the sun and the UV. It's wonderful stuff for what it is. The downside to silicone caulk is that it is not paintable with your standard latex house paint. And that's a problem, because if you go around your outside of your windows and your doors with latex caulk and then you put a new paint job on your house, you'll see that in a day or two you'll walk back out there and that bead of silicone caulk the paint will not stick to it. It'll come right off of there, because this stuff is silicone. It's basically rubberized, and so regular paint doesn't stick to it. Now there are ways around that. You can use oil-based primers and oil-based paint, but man, it gets really, really nasty and ugly. So use silicone where you know you gotta have that weatherproofing. And also areas that aren't as obvious. So underneath doors, underneath windowsills, places like that. Okay. Now, the other thing you'll notice when you go into the store is when you find the latex and the silicone, it's not just one color of each. This is a clear silicone, which is the most common. This is a white latex, which again is the most common because most of your interior trim is painted white in most homes. This stuff comes in all kinds of colors. You'll notice they try to match it to different paint colors and different popular kitchen cabinet colors and that sort of thing. And so yeah, you can play around with the colors that you want. They even have some now that I understand you can mix paint in it. So you can, whatever paint you're gonna put on your wall, you mix it in with your latex caulk, and then you can have the caulk exactly the same color as your paint. I haven't had a chance to try that stuff yet, but if that is true, that is a breakthrough. It's actually, that's just wonderful. Okay, so latex, silicone, those are your two best friends around your house. This other stuff is glues and adhesives. I'll do videos on that later on down the road, but right now, don't worry about them. So don't let that caulking aisle overwhelm you, okay? So that's your caulk. The next thing is your tools. And there's really only one major tool with caulking, and it's your caulking gun. They call it a caulking gun, okay? I have two here that I have in my shed. And they all have some pretty common features, but there are a few things that you will find on your average caulking gun that you need to know about and know how to use, because when it gets into technique, you don't want to be the person who puts that big bloopy line of caulk. You want to make sure and do it nice and clean. So here are your average caulking guns. Now, there are a few features on this one that I really want to call out that I think are really important that you should have when you buy a caulking gun, okay? The first one is they all slide. You're going to slide your caulk in here. But here's the deal. This one has that little rod right there. See that little piece of wire sticking out the front? That is awesome. That's amazing. You got to have that on your caulking gun. This green one, for some reason, doesn't have that. And so I just don't use this one as much. Here's what this is important for. Is so when you cut the tip of your caulking tube, right here at the top, there's a seal to keep it airtight. So even after you cut this, it's not going to be usable. You have to take this little wire and stick it in the end and poke holes in that little seal. So that is a wonderful little invention. The next thing you need is a paper towel is always handy with caulk. Okay, so make sure you get one that has this little rod on it. All right. Now, another thing you will notice on your standard caulking gun is that it'll have a hole in the handle right here. And you may not notice that, but that's actually there for a reason. Okay, see right there when I slide that? It has a little blade in there. Now, the reason they do that is so that you can cut the tips off of your caulking really easily. That's a really neat idea. Here's the problem. If you are trying to do caulking inside your home and you want to do a nice, clean, fine job, this thing is like doing surgery with an axe. Okay, it is not good for that. If you are doing things like roofing repair where you just want to goop up some roofing tar, this is great because you can just stick the tip in there, crimp it off, and off you go. But I recommend you do not use this if you are doing caulking inside your house. I'm going to show you how to do it properly in just a minute, but just be careful about using this right here. Okay, so I like this caulking gun the best. What about this one? Why is this one important? Okay, the feature that I like on this one that the other one doesn't have is this little trigger right here. Okay, so this is important because when you slide your caulking in and you're ready to go, once you start putting pressure on it, you squeeze it and you get that caulking moving through there and doing whatever job. When you finish up, say, a line and you pull the caulking gun up, a lot of times there's some back pressure in that tube. And the back pressure will make the caulking continue to come out. Maybe this has happened to you before, where you'll finish your thing, you'll pick up your caulking gun, and it's just dripping out the end. It's because there's pressure still on the caulking tube. What this little thing does is lets the pressure off. So you can squeeze, 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 and you click that, and it lets the pressure off. That's really important so you don't end up dripping it all over, especially if you're inside. Now, the way I get around that with this red one is to see it doesn't have the trigger on it. So what I'll do is when I'm caulking, I'll slide this in here, and when I caulk, as soon as I finish a line, I'll immediately grab that and pull it back out, okay? So I put it in, I squeeze, 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 and then I pull the pressure off of it. And you just get in the habit of doing that, and that lets the caulk stop pouring out the front. Now, you also always want to have your paper towel in your back pocket in case it does that. You can wipe it off nice and clean, okay? So, those are the basics of your standard caulking gun. Now I want to show you some techniques for how to actually do finish caulking like a pro. I mentioned to you that you should not use this little cutter thing right here, and that's absolutely true. And here's why. It's because when you're going for, now see, I've actually mocked up some finish carpentry. I did this sort of like a cross section of a door. So this would be your baseboard at the floor, and this would be a door frame. So you can see here, so I can demonstrate. Okay, so this is your pretty standard setup with baseboard and what they call case molding going up. So I'm going to demonstrate here. So here's the deal. You've painted, you have your nice little case molding here, and now you want to run a nice clean bead of caulk after you've painted your wall, right? But you have a gray wall or whatever color your wall is, and you have white trim, and you don't want to have a big bloopy, ugly line of caulk right there. So if you use that big hole, that's what you're going to get, a big bloopy line of caulk. So here's what you do. You take a really good, sharp box cutter razor. Really sharp, okay? Sharp blades are important. And what you do is you lay down your caulking tube, and you're going to cut a little bit, just a little bit off the tip of that tube. But this is super important, pro tip, you cut it at an angle, okay? You cut it at about a 45-degree angle on there. That is everything. You see that? That nice little clean bevel, they call that. It's a 45-degree angle. And you want to only cut off just enough to get that wire in there, okay? That's it. Just barely enough so you can slide that wire in there and break the seal. That's it, okay? What you're doing is you're going to control the amount of caulk that can come out the end of that tube at any one time. Okay, now you're getting into more, it's like painting. You're either painting with a big old brush or you're painting with a fine little brush. That's going to make a fine little brush. And that bevel on the end, I'm going to show you in a minute why that is going to help you end up with a nice clean bead of caulk without having to run your finger down it, because the moment you do that, you start making a mess. Okay, so let me show you how to do it. So I've cut my bevel and I've opened my caulk. I poked holes in the seal and I load my gun. Okay, I'm ready. Now, what I will normally do is I'll get my paper towel or whatever, and I will just squeeze a little bit of caulk into it to make sure I don't have an air bubble at the end. Okay, so squeeze a little bit in there. Okay, I have caulk going. Okay, there. Now, the thing you do is start at a corner. So this is the corner of my baseboard going up like this. Okay. You start at the corner, and you want the tip of that bevel to be in the corner of the baseboard. So where the baseboard meets the wall, you want to take that bevel and stick it right down in there, and then that corner is going to follow right in that crack, in that 90-degree angle that you make between the top of your baseboard and your wall. You're going to stick that right down in there and then go nice and slow and run that caulk. Now look what the bevel is doing. You see that? The bevel is actually straightening out the caulk as I run it. Look at that, okay? It's like having a little trowel in there, like a tool to smooth that caulk out as you're running it down the crack. That's how the pros do it. Okay, now once you do this, walk away. Don't touch that anymore. Do not run your finger through it. Don't touch it, because you have a nice, beautiful, clean caulk line. Here's the other thing that will happen is over the next 24 hours, that latex caulk will dry. And when it dries, it will shrink up just a little bit. It won't pull away from the wall. Don't worry about that. But it will shrink up and it will actually pull in nice and tight along the top of that baseboard. And when you walk back in the morning, it's going to look like somebody took a ruler and just ran it right down the side. Okay? So that's the technique for caulking around these finished carpentry inside your house. You can do it on your baseboards, you can do it up your case molding, crown molding, anywhere in your house that you need to do caulking, okay? So, you now know the best kinds of caulk to use, silicone versus latex. You know a little bit about the tools that you use. Make sure you get a caulking gun that has the little wire on it, and if you can, find the one with the trigger that lets the pressure off, and then cut the tip of that caulking in that nice clean little bevel, small tiny hole, and that way you can control the amount of caulk that goes onto your baseboards. And you will never again have those big, bloopy, ugly caulk lines. Thanks.